It's moved and seconded for approval of the agenda. Any additions or corrections to the agenda?
No additions.
Candy, please collect the vote. Thank you for the reminder.
Mrs. Melius?
Yes.
Mr. Ewing is still gone. Mrs. Sealy? Mr. Hoffman?
Yes.
Mr. Updike?
Yes.
Mrs. Mitchell?
Yes.
Mr. Anderson?
Yes.
Approved.
Very good. Thank you. And thank you again, Candy, for the reminder. Before we open the revenue neutral hearing, and later the budget hearing, I wanted to take a minute and thank everyone that had a part in compiling the school building needs assessment. This information, this data that so many people participated in the collection of was really important and critical to the development of this year's budget. Another piece is our budget's been available on our website for a while, and it's also good. I'm happy to report that there will be a slight decrease in the mill levy this year, which will be the third consecutive year. We had 11 years in a row at one point, and then we went up a little bit, and now we have 3 years in a row of decreases in the mill levy. So it's important that we acknowledge those successes and how we're managing our budget, our dollars in the district. With that, I want to open the revenue neutral hearing, and we'll receive a brief presentation from our Director of Finance, Doug Swin, followed by any public comments. So Doug?
Yes, good evening. Thank you, Board. My part is going to be extremely small. Most of what tonight is designed for is to allow the public to speak. So I'm going to give a brief overview of what the revenue neutral rate is. It's something that's relatively new. Last year was the first year that we had to go through this process. So this is year 2. The one thing that was different this year that didn't happen last year was everybody got a letter in the mail. And those letters gave estimates of what your tax responsibility was going to be based on all the information provided by those entities that levy taxes in your respective districts. So I'm going to share just briefly the timeline because timing is everything. And unfortunately, the timeline didn't allow us with the letters that went out to really give clear, zoned in, accurate mill levy projections. So you'll see here on this slide, it was June 14th that the Johnson County Treasurer's Office emailed us what our calculated revenue neutral rate would be. And that 57.995 mills represents what it would take this year to generate exactly the same amount of money as last year, dollar for dollar. Okay. The problem is if you're a growing district, rapidly growing district such as Spring Hill, there's just it's not even possible to hit that target. That would be a 9 mil decrease. We had to add staff because of the additional students. We've heard multiple different entities that's going to be dealing with inflation. We've seen costs go up already. It's just impossible to think that we can live on the same dollars that was generated last year again this year. So whether you exceed it by 0.1 or 10 mils, you exceed it. So it's just impossible for us to be revenue neutral. And so we notified Johnson County on July 14th. We gave a lid of 69.5 mils. We promised it would go no higher than that. Then as we had time to put the budget together, we realized that, yes, we can get by this year at 67.409. And that was the notice of hearing that the board adopted at their last meeting. It was published in the Miami County Republic and on the 24th. And then today is our hearing. So this is the opportunity if anybody wants to talk specifically about us exceeding our revenue neutral rate. this is the point where they can take over the mic and offer any comments. Now, once we talk about revenue neutral rate and just the fact that we're exceeding that, the next hearing is going to be about the overall budget. And we'll talk, and I'll go into a lot more detail what the budget looks like. This is just the fact that to hit that revenue neutral rate, we would have to be at 57.995 mils, and it's just nowhere possible for us to hit that target. So if we were declining in enrollment, maybe we could do that. I will say I've talked to my neighbors. I don't know of anybody around us that's going to be able to remain revenue neutral, but there could be a few districts out there that try to. I would say it's going to be far and few between, but definitely not a growing district. So with that, I will give up the floor. And if anybody, you don't have to sign up to speak. If you want to come right up and ask any or speak, you can ask questions. We'll do our best to try to get those answered if we can. So.
Nobody is interested. I am. My name is Rodolfo Arevalo and I live in 19419 West 200th Street. And I'm a retiree. I've been retired since 2014. I live on Social Security and retirement benefits, which are pretty much steady. I'm seeing an 18% increase in my property taxes. This year, my property taxes will go up. If all entities do what they said they were going to do, we'll raise my taxes by a little over $900. Out of that $900, over $600 is from the school district. So that's 66% of the increase comes from you guys. And I noticed that Doug mentioned that obviously we're a fast growing district, and I assume that's correct. I'm not going to argue the point. But the fact is that the increase in student is between, depending on which table you use that's in your data, is either 7% or 6%. Okay. If your enrollment is only projected to increase by 6%, why are you raising 18% more revenue? Doesn't make sense to me. When you look at your debt service, for the last 2 years, your debt service has been $225 million. The projection is that it'll be $220 million. That's a decrease of $5 million, but yet you're increasing the debt limit mill levy also. That doesn't make any sense. In addition to that, in the data that I was given, it has platitudes about the nice things that the district has done this past year. One of them was that you redid your bond that you have, and you saved supposedly $10 million. If you save $10 million, why are you raising the rate for the bonds? It doesn't make any sense. I mean, I agree, you're a fast growing district, but I just don't see the need to increase 18% of your revenue. And that's basically, like he mentioned, 9 more mills than I think you should raise if you were to stay revenue neutral. I don't see great increases in teacher salaries because that only went up, I think, the cost for teachers by 11%. The only big number that you have in your budget that is large is what you're going to spend for food service. Your projected budget is that'll go up 30%, more or less. That's the only one. Everything else, it's below, it's growing at a slower rate than the 18% you're going to raise in revenue. It doesn't make any sense. I would sincerely ask you to relook at your budget. Thank you.
Thank you.
My name is Gerald Roberts. I live at 17305 Umbra. The gentleman who just spoke has covered a lot of ground really well. So I'm going to try not to repeat his things. I understand about inflation. We're getting our property taxes increased too. The majority of our taxes for Johnson County and property taxes are the Spring Hill School District, the majority. I also understand costs go up. What I don't understand is the 230 bond issue with a percentage rate difference of 29.2% over your revenue neutral. Bond interest is set. What's inflation got to do with that? I don't get it. I think the budget itself going 18% over is very high. I know you have an increase in cost, but you have an increase in property taxes too. Billing out here is exploding. You have to have more revenue because you have more people coming in. You have more people coming in, which is the reason you have more students. So I would simply ask that you reconsider this. What this school district is costing us is really out of hand. I mean, when the majority of your property taxes is this one school district, I really don't understand that and have a lot of objections.
Thank you. Any other comments or public participation on the revenue neutral rate? For the revenue neutral rate hearing?
Okay. Mr. Swin, how many students are we up over last year?
If you want to know how many we are up today versus a year ago, I think we're around 100 to 125. Not nearly as big as the increase we saw last year where we jumped about 250, 260. Still don't know why. I know our demographer had predicted an enrollment increase this year of a little over 200. Can't really explain at this point in time why it's about 100 off. But that's the numbers we're looking at today. And the day that matters is September 20th, how many kids we have enrolled and attending on September 20th. I don't anticipate we're going to see a huge fluctuation in kids between now and then, with that being 8 days off. It is important to note, though, that the growth portion does not get funded in the current year. So even if we gain 120 kids and we have to go out and hire 3 more teachers, 4 more teachers to accommodate that, the money for those kids is a year behind. So it makes things a little more challenging for us.
Sure.
Because I forgot it and I wanted to make the point. In the data that you also provided, you happen to have projected $82 million in reserves. If you have $82 million in reserves, why are you raising an additional 12 million in revenue taxes, in property taxes? I used to run a budget of $240 million a year when I was employed. And my biggest reserve was $22 million. You're, from my perspective, way out of line in terms of what you would need in reserves. Sorry.
Hi, this is Allie. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Hi, Doug. Thanks for the work going into this. Following the last meeting, were we able to get some data on how many houses we have increased in the district, and followed up with the demographer on how many houses we project to increase in the next year or so?
Let me make sure I understand your question correctly. You want to know the increase in the number of homes. I believe I did go look at, I was thinking Rob Schwartz's report back in March. I want to say that one of his slides had building permits in it. That doesn't necessarily, building permits doesn't necessarily translate immediately into taxable homes, because it could take, 3, 6, 12 months to get the home built. So I don't have a firm number on the number of homes, but I think there is something in his slides that point out to the anticipated growth.
Yeah, and so what we had discussed was just getting a better view on how much the district has grown overall, and it sounds like if our numbers are even off by 100 students, then we need to get some updated data from him as well to be able to make a financially sound decision.
Yeah, keep in mind, even if we're off 100 kids this year, that's going to impact next year's budget, not the one that's before us tonight.
Sure. But this year's increase in 18% in the property value increase is affecting our patrons right now. So if we're that far off with our numbers of students, I realize we don't get the revenue from them for a year. But wondering, has the growth slowed down as far as home building? Is that I don't feel like we have, and I know we talked about this last meeting and was hoping to have some follow up on that, but I'm feeling a little bit uncomfortable with some of the decision without having a full picture.
But I just want a point of clarification that there's been, I think, 2 statements that our budget is increasing 18%. And that's not accurate, correct?
Yeah, I mean, assessed valuation, which
Assessed
is what
valuation.
triggers how much dollars we let, that is 18%. Which means a lot of people's homes did probably go up 10% in value or more. Not everybody, but probably a good percentage. If people's homes remain flat and the mill levy is going down just a little bit, the taxes aren't going up. What's driving people's their taxes going up is their home values, not what the district is levying.
Right. And I understand that part. Our property value taxes have increased, which then does translate into what we get as a district. But the only thing that we have control over is the mill levy. So I understand we don't have any kind of, and like, as I said last meeting, we don't have any control over a person's property value tax or how much their home has increased, but we do have the opportunity to offset it potentially as it is filtering into our budget with the mill levy. And I would like to have a more clear picture on what the projections are, and has home building slowed down because of the inflation, or what? I feel like our demographer has done a really good job over time, and hopefully we would have a
I just want to mention all the numbers that go into this year's budget, we know. Granted, the future, I don't know what next year looks like as far as home values or what the assessed valuation might be, but we have a pretty good idea. We know that what this budget's built on is based on an 18% increase in assessed valuation, which is a combination of existing homes going up and new homes being built and going on the tax rolls. We know how many kids are being funded in this year's budget. So this year's budget, we know what we are anticipating needing to levy to meet those needs. What's going to happen as far as over the next 12 months, we'll have to iron out with next year's budget.
Right, I understand that. So I do appreciate you saying that the increase of 18% on average property value taxes does impact our budget.
Yes, that 18% goes into the calculations that we made. And that's a combination, not only existing homes, but new homes being added.
Mr. President, just a point of clarification as well. Ally, to your question, we have been in contact with the demographer. He gets the data for us or from us for this year after we close our September 20th count, so that he's using a year-to-year consistent number. So as we flush out the new students that have come, the students that have left the district, we have been talking about that. He's got some ideas about what he thinks might be happening already, but he'll be getting that data from us in the next couple of weeks, and then he'll start looking at it and so that he can prepare something.
Yeah, I think that's an important point too. So we don't have all the data, and that makes sense until after count day, so in the next 8 days. So then we will have a better look at this. Thank you for clarifying that.
Any other questions or comments on the revenue neutral hearing?
Two more questions.
Okay.
What was the mill levy last year?
$67.5.
The overall mill levy last year was 67.534. And what's being proposed tonight is 67.409.
On the higher assessment,
Yes.
which will be an increase in revenue, correct?
Yes.
What is budgeted for the bond payments compared to last year?
The bond payments, you want to know that mill levy by itself?
So is that
You have a
part of
budgeted
revenue
amount. I'd
neutral?
like to know how much money we're spending on the 230 bond issue that was approved in 2018.
Okay.
Excuse me, this is a budget hearing issue question, correct?
It really doesn't pertain to it kind of.
In the revenue neutral information we were given, that's where the 29% comes, is in the bond issue, which is the bond issue is capped at 3 to 5% interest over the number of years, according to the documents I've seen. So inflation, the percentage is capped. I'd like to have an idea, if we were 29% over revenue neutral, what was the actual budget amount last year? And what was the budget amount this year?
And I can give you what the mill levy was. The mill levy for the bond and interest fund last year was 18.712. This year it's 17.709.
Again, it's on an increased evaluation, which is the reason I was asking for dollar numbers, so I at least have an idea of what it's being raised to.
Gotcha. Now, I will tell you that when we put the budget together, bond and interest is one piece. And we try to make sure the overall mill levy is either staying flat or going down.
I understand that, but you've separated it out as a separate portion in the information we were given.
As
which is
per state
reason-
statute, correct.
That's where we all are getting the 29% because that's the number that flashes out at us. And we'd like to know, are we getting a 29% increase in our taxes? Are we getting no increase?
Gotcha. And when you say taxes, you mean your overall, what you're going to owe USD 230,
Yes.
not only just the bond payments, but all the others combined,
Well,
correct?
yes, my understanding of the revenue neutral, I can talk about the bond payments and the operating budget is not a revenue neutral item, or I probably would be speaking about that.
Okay.
But yeah, I would love to know the whole school district package.
Right. The whole package is the 67.409.
Which is how much more than last year?
It is it's a decrease of 0.125. The mill levy,
The mill levy,
yes.
but the dollar numbers, I think is about 12 million more, isn't it?
As far as what that generates, it would be page 185 in our budget book, where it shows a breakdown, you know, the general fund, LOB, all the different funds that we levy in. You're looking at, I think if we go to line 100, you're looking at 26 million overall. But some of that, at least the general fund, that goes to the state and then gets distributed back to us. You can separate out bond and interest and talk about it separately, but the truth of the matter is we will raise and lower that based on what we're doing in some of the other funds and the needs in other areas. So I don't know how to properly answer your question other than to get it
I'm getting that
overall.
impression. Yeah, okay.
And we will cover more numbers in the actual budget hearing. This here is talking about whether or not we can hit that target of 57.995. And I will tell you, there's just absolutely no way. We can discuss the ins and outs of the overall budget, but to be revenue neutral is not realistic and it will bankrupt the school district if we did that.
Any final questions? All right, we'll close the revenue neutral rate hearing, and at this point, we will open the budget hearing. Dr. Luttrell.
On the, like I said, on the fiscal year budget hearing, if anybody that wants to speak, but Doug, do you want to?
I'll go do my presentation real quick and then we can open up questions. All right, I got about 12 slides, I think, to cover, and then we can open up for questions. All right. First slide, increasing enrollment. It is important to note that the 22-23 number is estimated. You'll see that we put 250 in there. This had to be done long before school started. We thought we were going to be closer to the 200 range. The way the school finance budgeting works, you want to be on the high side. Otherwise, you have to turn around and republish to get that extra authority. So we budgeted 250. And right now it's looking more like 125 increase. So that will definitely impact us for next year. Overall growth in Johnson County, I show what our neighbors in Johnson County have done over the last few years compared to what we're doing. You will see that our growth has been relatively steady, 7%, 5%.
Then because of COVID, a lot of people chose to keep their kids at home. But we still were the only district in Johnson County that still grew. We grew by 2.2%. And then a bunch of kids came back to us last year on count date. I told you we gained about 260, which put us up right at 8%. And that is head count, number of bodies. And you'll see sometimes there's FTE, sometimes there's head count. Those are two different things. We get funding based on FTE, and that's full-time equivalency. A student may come to us, and if they're only going to school half a day, well, we only get half funding for them. A full-time student would get full funding. So this is based on head count. Assessed valuation, this is shows you a long history of what our district has done. Back in the early 90s, we were in the $40 million range, 40 million. And now we're approaching 400 million for assessed valuation. State aid. This is just shows you as as our evaluation goes up and our enrollment goes up, it affects our assessed valuation per pupil. And as assessed valuation per pupil goes up and we look wealthier, that means we get less state aid. And we anticipate our state aid to go down. Now, here's a look at our mill levy history, going clear back to 84, 85. You'll see that many years ago, the mill levy jumped all over the place. And I don't know about you, but as a taxpayer, I would hope for a little bit of consistency. I know we all get excited when our taxes go down, but I would be very frustrated if they did a significant decrease in one year only to turn around and go way up the next. But that's what we experienced in the 80s and even into the 90s. I've been here since 2003. You will see that when I came on board, that was 4 bond issues ago. We did to afford to build our new high school as well as half of Prairie Creek. We raised the mill levy significantly. It was by far and away that one of the biggest bond issues this district ever passed. We raised it. And then the mill levy did take a little bit of an increase in 07, 08. And then we went 12 years declining it. It wasn't great, but it was declining. For the 2018 bond election, we did have to raise it just a little over 4 mils. And now the last 3 years, we have lowered it slightly. Here is just a breakdown by the different funds. And I think it's important to note when we're building the budget, we're looking at overall. We can't just focus on one fund and go, okay, we want this one to go up 5%. We want this one to go up 5%. We want this. You have to look and see where the numbers fall. Some years we can raise one a little more to generate some operating cash. In other years we can't. So we have shuffled. For many years, we weren't levying anything in special assessment, but yet we had special assessments that we were paying on. The last 2 years, that's something where we relied on cash balances for several years, but now it was necessary to start levying in those funds again. If we get a healthy cash balance in those funds, then we can shut those off and either lower the mill levy or levy it somewhere else. But overall, what we're trying to do is keep the overall mill levy declining if we can. Here is a 10-year quick history of our neighbors. You will see that if you go back 10 years, Blue Valley was in the 70s. Gardner was almost at 80. DeSoto was almost at 80. We've been nowhere near that high in that period, and we're not near that high today. But they were growing pretty rapidly back then. And unfortunately, when you're rapidly growing, you're passing bond issues, you have a lot of debt to pay, and it pushes that mill levy up. I'm happy to report that 2 of the last 3 bond issues that we did pass did not result in a mill levy increase. And I've got a slide coming up here shortly on that. This is extremely important because a rapidly increasing district, in my opinion, is severely penalized. This used to be in the formula for more than 15 years. And then when they revamped it about 4 or 5 years ago, they changed some things. I Yeah, I don't know that they had a good reason to, but what they did was they unfairly punished rapidly growing districts. You'll see here that because now we have to deal with this delay in enrollment, we're just now getting funded for the 260 kids we got last year in this year's budget. Because we have to wait a full year for that growth to be funded, you're talking a delay of almost $1.3 million. That's 3.2 mils. If we could go back 10 years to that funding formula, we would be lowering the mill levy a lot more right now. We would be. We would have the cash to do so. There's 3.2 mils we're losing because of the current formula. And then there's a difference in the state aid calculations, whether it's older bonds or newer bonds. One's funded at 52%. The newer bond issues are only at 12%. And right there, that difference between the two percentages, if it was all funded at 52%, that's 6.8 mils we would have to potentially reduce the levy. And then finally, and for life of me, I don't know why they removed this, because it's very expensive to open a new facility, because you're not going to open it and immediately fill it to full capacity, because then you have no room for your future growth. And the state used to recognize for many, many years that new facilities, school districts that are growing and adding new facilities needed extra funding to open them. There's, you're having to heat and cool a full, as though it's a full building, even though it may be only a half capacity. So there was money involved many years ago that they pulled out of the formula. If we could just have that piece right there back in the formula, that's 400,000. And I tell you tonight, we would be lowering the mill levy another 1 mil. We wouldn't need that. So you add it all up, and there's 11 mills that if the funding formula was what it used to be, that did not penalize rapidly growing districts, we could do a lot more with the mill levy this year as far as declining it. I do think it's important to note our promises kept over the last 4 bond elections that I've been part of. In 2003, we did a bond election for $48.6 million. It was by far and away the biggest in our school's history. We told taxpayers it was going to increase the mill levy 14.5 mils. That it's an incredibly large number. And we did. It went up to 68.5 mils. But I'm happy to say today it's lower than that. And then in 2011, we came to the voters. We said we need 39 million. We promised we're not going to raise the mill levy. And today it's no higher than it was in 2011 when we passed that. Same thing in 2016, we came to the voters. We said we needed 82.4 million. We promised at that time, we says, hey, we promised we're not going to increase the overall mill levy for 2 years. After that, it just depends on where we're at. And we've not raised the mill levy for that election. And then 2018, that was one where 72, there was just no way we could levy that much debt and not increase the overall mill levy. It did go up 4.25 mils. And then it immediately, we started dropping it since then. Not huge, but it is going down slightly. I do want to point out, I do put together a budget book that the public is free to pick up. It has all the details of the budget, what we have to file to the state. It's a little over 200 pages. I do have some copies sitting out on a table. Public's welcome to grab one. Every page that's in here is also on our website. You can go look at budget and pull up everything that's in here. It does break everything down by fund. It has a lot of history as far as where we were 10 years ago, 5 years ago. You can look at, the question was raised as far as bond and interest, and I don't think I did a good job of answering it, but page 177 is the bond and interest fund. It does show you what has been collected in taxes the last 2 years. It breaks it down between ad valorem, delinquent tax, motor vehicle. It'll give you the breakdown for the last 2 years. It also gives you the anticipated for the current year. Now, I will tell you, the way bond and interest works is that you have your debt and you know how much you owe for a given year. And for this year, we're going to have to make just over 14 million in payments. Part of that's going to come in from the state for state aid, and the rest of it's on the local taxpayer. So again, as the state aid fluctuates, that means the local taxpayer can either pay less or more. So state aid is a critical piece. And then also cash balances. If we are carrying over a healthy cash balance, and then it means we don't have to levy as much. I would like to, you mentioned 82 million. I have no idea where you got 82 million in reserves. The page I would have you refer to as far as cash balances go, which kind of breaks it down by fund, is on page 192 of my budget book. You'll see that on July 1st, 2022, that we had 16.7 million in reserves. And 10.5 of that was in bond and interest. So I don't know where the 82 million came from, but that's, if I was to show somebody all of our cash balances, and we did go in depth at our last budget workshop meeting, and that presentation is online for you to pull up at from our August 22nd meeting, I believe. We talked about cash balances, and ours are dangerously low because we've tried to decrease the mill levy. We've been very sensitive to that. We realize that as assessed valuation grows up, it is going to generate more dollars, but at the same time, we're hiring more staff. We want to make sure that the kids come first. And, you know, a new teacher is $55,000. And then having to provide classroom space for all the growth, additional buses, the whole 9 yards. So everything's going up. And if we ever get healthier cash balances, I will be standing before you saying, hey, we're in a good position to lower the mill levy even more. But we've operated on a very thin line, in my opinion, to where, as much as I would want to decrease the mill levy just a little more, it's just not realistic at this time. I did want to point out the 10 million, which is in my next slide. The 10 million in savings for restructuring debt is really what's been accomplished over the last 15 years. That didn't just happen last year. So that 10 million has helped us over the last several budgets and will help us a little going forward. But it's not like we got a $10 million in fluctuation in just one budget year. That's been spread out over several years. And with that, I'm going to stop there, and then anybody from the public, again, is welcome to ask whatever questions they might have regarding the overall budget for this year.
You gave me a copy of this, thank you very much, a week ago. And that's where I get my numbers from. It's very clear, just like most other governmental units, that you do incremental budgeting. You don't do any form of zero-based budgeting. And what that basically means, for those of you that are on the council that aren't accountants, which I have been, means that you just add on. You never go back and look at what did we really do with the money we gave somebody to spend, some department. And I would hazard to say, if I were to see a line item budget, which is not in here, that you could probably look from year to year and say, well, you know, the maintenance department never used the $10 million we gave them, they've never used more than 8 million. I'm making that up, okay? Because I don't.
Just so you're clear that you're pulling these numbers out of nowhere, so.
right.
You know, it's all
But I'm
theoretical.
just saying that if you folks went through the budget on a line by line on budget, you could see whether money is really being used or not used. And if so, you could either redirect it to where somebody is really using and needs more support, rather than simply adding on when you don't know whether it's being totally used or not used. And I don't know, I know that Doug probably keeps track of who's doing what. But that's the only way that because it's very clear from looking at the mill levies, and Doug is correct. I mean, you know, you look at, for example, the cap on the general mill levy. The state says, you folks, nobody can raise it in the state of Kansas more than 20 mills. That's your max. You've been at the max forever. The assessments of property keep going up, but you still stay at the max. Why? If our property is worth more, and this year it went up 18%, 4 years ago it went up 19%. In between, it's gone up between 6 at the lowest and another 10. So, I mean, if you look at it over a 5-year period, probably assessed values have gone up something like 50%. But we still keep the cap at 20? I mean, give us a break. Thank you.
Mr. Swin, I have a question.
Sure.
I just want to make sure I'm looking at this correctly. As we go through each of these funds, it actually does give us the actual amount spent last year, 21 to 22, not the budgeted amount, correct?
Yeah, it is designed to give, we have probably close to 5,000 line items that make up our overall budget. But this is designed to give a fairly line item detail for people. You know, if you go to page 99, the general fund budget, you start off with instructional salaries. That's your teachers. How much are you paying out of your general fund for teachers? And we can pay for teachers out of certain other funds, depending on what they do. But this should give you kind of an idea on how much are we spending on teachers, how much for the support staff, how much for insurance, how much for Social Security. There is a fairly good breakdown given if you go through each and every fund that makes up the budget. The general fund's just the biggest one out of all of them, and that's where most of our operating dollars are at. We're a people industry. Most of our budget is people, and as kids grow, staff grows, and that's what's driving the need for more dollars, is the fact that we want to try to keep class sizes as low as we can afford, and to do so costs money, and each kid needs a desk and other things to be educated properly. And so, every kid costs, and as population goes up, it's going to drive our budget up.
Doug, I was looking back at the cash balances.
Yes.
Aren't we, I don't recall how many districts there are in the state, but aren't we around one being the lowest cash balance in the state? I think we're either 9 or 10.
There was an analysis done by, it's been a couple of years ago. They had a formula. They looked at certain funds and said, okay, what are your cash balances in these funds? And let's add them all up and see what your operating budget is. And at that time, they were recommending that districts be somewhere between 10 and 15%. We've been around 3 to 4. We're not where if somebody would call up the state and go, does Spring Hill have high cash balances? They're going to go, no, they're operating, they have been, and we've done that intentionally. But that just means we're running a fine line. You go cutting the 2 mils out of the budget this year, and it may totally deplete cash balances if we get a huge surprise somewhere in the budget. So there's a cost for running a thin line like we have. And if for some reason our cash balances, I come back next year and costs didn't materialize like we thought, well, then, yeah, we might be able to give a mill or two relief next year, depending on where all the variables come in. We don't know for sure, how many kids and what property values are going to do and what inflation is going to do, but we'll reevaluate all those variables and put together a reasonable dollar amount that we feel like we need to operate with.
Sounds good.
Mr. Swing, could you re-explain how that we budget for more students than we get, but we don't actually get the money for that unless they come in, right? How's that all work?
Yeah, several of these budgets, you've got to budget just a little on the high side, because if you, for instance, special education, we could suddenly have a really high need student come in that maybe needs one-on-one or a pair or two that we didn't anticipate. So we're going to budget enough in our special ed fund that if those needs materialize, we've got enough budget authority to spend on that child and meet those needs. If it doesn't happen, then we're not gonna spend those dollars, and then we can carry them over next year, and that's going to help us with next year's budget. So there's a difference between authority, and if you don't set your authority high enough, then you could be leaving tax dollars on the table that might cut you short in the long run. So we do anticipate a little high on the student side, but we're only going to get funded for what kids actually come. Thank you.
Any other questions on the budget?
I have a question. I'm sorry.
Go ahead.
Go ahead. I'm sorry, Sharon, go ahead.
I just had a quick question. When you talked about that, it seems like there's at least 3 or 4 ways that since we're growing, we're not getting that funding like used to be in the formula from the state. Is there any good reason why we're not?
I can tell you real quickly, the explanation that was given at a state level was the legislators didn't like to be surprised when enrollment jumped and now they had to come up with more budget dollars at the end of the year. And what they didn't realize was that as a state of Kansas, it's projected to decline the next 5 years. There is no growth to worry about. They know pretty good what enrollment's going to do. There's no reason why they can't fund us for current year kids. They did it for over 15 years. It makes no sense. And so even if we suddenly get 50 kids show up between now and the end of the school year, we're going to educate them. We're going to find we're going to find classroom space. If we have to go out and hire a teacher in the middle of the year, we will. And that's all on us. And not only those kids that show up after count day, which is September 20th, if they show up on September 21st and enroll and attend, we're going to educate them the entire year for free. We won't see any funding for them. And then we got to wait for them to count. Hopefully they come back the next year and we get to count them. And then we'll get funding the year after. So we could almost end up educating a student 2 full years before we actually get funding for them. It's not a fair formula. It's great if you're a declining district because you get to live off of you don't have to start shrinking your budget. You have plenty of time to let people retire and just not fill those positions, make the cuts you need to. But a growing district does not have the funds. We have to wait for that money to show
So
up.
do you have an idea of how many districts in the state are actually growing versus how many are decreasing in enrollment? I mean, ballpark. It seems like it's much fewer that are growing.
I would say 20 to 30% are growing. I would say 70% are shrinking. We know that the overall state is shrinking or has been. And I would say of that 20 to 30% that's growing, I would say we're like in the top 5% for being in what I would consider a rapidly growing district. You know, we're consistently hitting over a period of 4 or 5 years, 5% average, 4 or 5% average. So I don't think anybody's close to us. But we could definitely, there are numbers out there, enrollment numbers that I can go back, and if you want me to bring that back to the next meeting, I can show you what individual districts have done across the state, all 286 of them. So I'll put our numbers up against anybody.
I say it every meeting. I'll say it again. We basically educate a small Western Kansas district for free every year. And it's really what it is. I mean, the one I grew up in was about that size. Applaud you for pulling it off.
Ally, did you have a question?
I did. I'm sorry. Can you hear me?
Yes, we can.
Hello?
Yes,
Okay,
we can hear
thank
you.
I think there's a little bit of a delay, so I apologize. So Doug, looking at our numbers, I have 2 comments. Looking at our numbers, if I understand how we would project higher and we would budget high, I think that that's smart budgeting. But if we were projected with our budget at 250 students and we think that it's about half at 125, that's what I think I understand you saying. So when we are over projecting or over budgeting, what number do you usually use for that? And I mean, we can multiply that by the average per student right now and know how much we're cushioning the budget, so to speak. And then my second comment is I do believe that we need to leverage our legislators. We need to be talking to our legislators about this formula, about what is happening, about how our district is growing. And I do think that they will listen. So I kind of making that pledge and that promise right now to go out there and talk to as many as I can, because I understand how this formula is negatively impacting our district.
Yes, we need all the help we get. I've said often that if just Blue Valley or Shawnee Mission or Olathe, one of the big 3 were growing right now, their lobbyists would be in Topeka and it'd get fixed. But unfortunately, we're small. We don't have our own lobbyists, and nobody really cares about little old Spring Hill. But if you do have an opportunity to talk to our legislators, I highly recommend that it be brought up to them that if they would just fix that 1.3 million immediate influx of new revenue and into our budget would allow us to make a significant reduction in the mill levy for 1 year. It wouldn't necessarily mean every year it's going to keep going down, but it would allow us to make a significant mill levy drop that I think voters would appreciate.
I do think that we do have legislators that would listen to that. And I do think that it's a very valid point that you made, that it impacts the delay in the year to receive funding when we have to wait a year, but also when you're building a new building. All of that does make sense. I think we need to collectively leverage our legislators as much as possible. So to my other question though, how many students do we usually, if you're trying to project, is there a percentage, like we project 15% more for the budget? I mean, right now we're at at double, right? If we thought we would be at 250 for the budget and we're at 125, realizing count day is in another 8 days.
Yeah, I usually I look at Rob Schwartz's number from RSP, and I usually will tack on 20 or 30. We're constantly monitoring the enrollment numbers and checking, especially this time of year. I mean, once we get to count date, it is what it is. But as we're building the budget heading into a new year, I usually take his number, maybe pad it by 10%. So if he's saying 220, I might say 240, 250, just to give us a little cushion. It's not an exact science. And obviously it goes back to just because you budget a little higher there, you're only going to get true funding for the kids that are enrolled and attending. So you can't raise more there than what the kids are going to generate.
So if you add, I just want to make sure I clearly understand this, Doug. If you have, we assume 250, is that what you said? Do 220, we add 20% to 242. We don't get funding for 242 if it's 125. If it's 125, we get funding for 125.
Correct.
So it's not right. And it's when you talk about cushioning, you're talking about an overestimation so that the authority that we need is captured fully.
Right.
Rather than if we go over that, we have to work through the entire process again.
Yes, we'd have to, if we cut ourselves short and we realize, we need another 100,000 in authority to spend in special ed because we had some kids come in that we didn't anticipate, some high needs kids. We would publish another notice in the paper that we needed additional authority to spend, and we would have a hearing just like we're doing tonight. And then the board would take action to adopt the amended budget. So that's if we didn't budget properly and cut ourselves short.
Thank you.
Because otherwise we can only budget by fund what was published in the paper.
Okay, thank you.
So I know that the number varies, but what is our current number per student that we are receiving in funding?
Yeah, the base state aid per pupil this year is $4,846 per child. And then there's weightings. The weightings are actually funded in the current year, which makes totally no sense that we can get like weightings such as bilingual. We get a little extra money for bilingual because that requires extra services. We get money for transportation for those kids that are over 2.5 miles. It costs money for us to bus them, and we're required to bus them if they reside over 2.5 miles. We get weightings for career tech ed classes that qualify because typically those classes require, if you're doing like a small engines class, you may have to buy motors and other stuff to help teach that class. They're more expensive. The state recognizes that and they'll give you some additional funding for those classes. That's all reflected in the Form 150, which is what makes up the general fund budget. And if you have the budget, the document, that's page 69 in our budget support document that we put out. 69 takes the general fund budget and it breaks it down by all, how many kids do we have? Where's all those other weightings and what's that add up to for an overall total?
Right, because it isn't just state funding, it's federal funding. Many things go into that. So I just was wondering what number you were using this year, the total number, the average total number per student.
Okay. To get that number, I would probably go to, again, page 69, line 14. shows everything lumped in there. 38,827,827. But it's important to note that our virtual school flows through there, which skews the numbers terribly. There's almost a little over 9 million from our virtual school. So if you strip that out and said, for rough math, 29 million, 29 and a half, and then turn around and divided that back, the number at the top, the 3572.7, that should give you a fairly close number if you're trying to get back to a per pupil amount. But that's just in your general fund budget. That doesn't include other funds.
Okay, so I think what I'm hearing is that we don't use that number. You're not using a number as an average.
No, I will say, some people like to go to page 192 in our budget and look at the revenue per pupil. It's towards the bottom there. If you mentioned state revenue, federal revenue, local revenue, if you go to page 192, you'll see that 2 years ago, that number was about 13 million. Last year it was 15.9, and this year it drops to 14.8. And that's a mix of several funds. So, and the 2022, 2023 numbers are budgeted versus actual. And that's two different things. We've mentioned that we intentionally budget high in certain funds so that we don't have to come back and republish. And so that kind of makes the 22, 23 number look a little higher than it actually is. I do know that part of the budget book, and again, it all depends on what you want to look at. There's lots of numbers in it. There is a budget at a glance that's, both on our website and in the budget book. If you go to page 34, it starts, breaking it down, amount per pupil there. And you'll see 2020-21 was expenditures from the different funds totaled 11.5 2 years ago, then 12.4, and this year budgeted amount is 13.6. So there's all kinds of numbers you can look at throughout the budget. It's complicated because some of it's locally funded, which is what the people here today are worried about, is what's my responsibility? How much am I going to owe more than I did last year versus what the state's paying us? And we do get quite a bit of money in state aid. We get a little bit in federal funding, but not very much because we're a fairly affluent district.
Okay, thank you. That's the number that I was kind of looking for. That 13,600, if that's what we're using for budget. And what I'm looking at with that is if we had budgeted for 250 kids and we think that our count is coming in at around 125. So we can multiply that number. And again, understanding that we need to plan for over budgeting for things that we can't foresee. So, but those are good numbers to have, the 13,600. Thank you.
Okay.
Final questions? Okay, Dr. Luttrell.
Couple comments, like I said, kind of looking at everything kind of with a new perspective. I do think that, like I said, Spring Hill has made a very, very strong effort over the years to manage their growth with all the unique flavors and features that come into that. And I can attest Also that again, as far as cash balances are concerned, they have ran very lean and continue to run very lean, and that is a testament to the work on the part of many individuals. As far as our demographer and the numbers, I wouldn't get too worried about that right now. I do think those numbers are not an exact science. I do think those numbers that were, even though we might not quite be where we, at that yet, we still have a couple of weeks in count day, but even then, I think the kids are out there. I think there's some unique factors. And again, I've kind of been impacted by that to some degree, being the new person, having to have found a house. And then, even though it's a new house, but just, getting into it at the schedule that was supposed to have been definitely, has been delayed. There's a lot of factors for that. I think the numbers will catch up. As to the part about the delayed funding for you, that hurts. I mean, there's no doubt that when you're funding and educating students without getting money on them, and then you may not see if they move back out, within the time you get paid, that's frustrating. However, I do think, as Director Sealing said, I do believe that right now, more than ever within the past few years, that now the time is right where the legislators may be more than willing to listen, simply because, again, it's my own hunch, but because of the fact that with the new plant coming in over with DeSoto with 4,000 jobs, plus some of the legislature initiatives that were passed last spring that are going to affect many districts in terms of enrollment in that, I think that that's a chip that we can bring to the table as we head into lobbying days over the course of the next few months about. And I think that some districts that might not have been in tune to be that supportive of listening about the importance of getting funded right then and again, when you might be much more willing to listen right now. So I think, was pointed out with the director saying, I think we are going to have to capitalize on that, but it's going to take a lot of individuals, not just board members, not just superintendents, but it's going to take a lot of people to become informed on that so that we can try to work together to make that happen. That's what
Thank you. We'll now close the budget hearing and continue on our agenda. Our next agenda item is business with individuals. We do have one card. Courtney Hutton. Know that the board provides an opportunity to comment on anything with the exception of personnel or students or individuals. Those are handled in an executive session through an official complaint. Know that you're welcome to provide comments and feedback, but generally, usually there won't be a response from the board. It's our time to listen. With that, I would say that to hold your comments to a maximum of 5 minutes. Thank you.
Thank you for listening to me. I came here tonight not planning on speaking, but I come out of concern for my daughter. She's in elementary school at Prairie Creek. And the Biden administration has proposed an amendment to Title IX that could drastically change my daughter's life. And I worry that I'm going to send her to school and she's not going to feel safe going to the bathroom. And that she's going to miss opportunities on sports teams. And I feel like I'm going to lose control of what she's being taught in the school, and that the schools may not be honest with what's being presented to her. And I don't know if the school or the district can or would do anything to make this not happen in our district. And I don't know if there's anything that we can do here or parents can do to try to stop this and get ahead of it. Like you guys just mentioned, we do accept minimal federal funding. If there's a way that we can do what we can to not be subject to these new proposed amendments. That's all that I ask.
Okay, thank you. Appreciate you coming in. Moving on to the consent agenda, which consists of approval of the consent agenda items, approval of the minutes, and personnel. Any questions, comments, or discussion on the consent agenda?
Mr. President, I move for approval of the consent agenda.
Second the motion.
It's moved in second for approval of the consent agenda as presented. Any final questions or comments? Candy, please collect the vote.
We'll start the vote with Mrs. Sealing. Mrs. Sealing?
Yes. Yes.
Mr. Hoffman?
Yes.
Mr. Updike?
Yes.
Mrs. Mitchell?
Yes.
Mr. Anderson?
Yes.
Mrs. Milius?
Yes.
Approved.
Very good. Thank you. Moving on to our next agenda item, which is good news recognitions and announcements. Dr. Luttrell?
Yes, we said last week we had a little video. Oh, yes. Last month I said, last meeting we had, I was going to start trying to do some changes to this to get us some new look. We are going to have a video every at least once a month highlighting one particular school of what's going on at the place, in addition to some other just recognitions. Before we get to the video, one exciting thing that I was able to participate in today was join representatives of the Spring Hill Education Foundation. We were able to surprise 6 teachers with 5 separate teacher excellence grants that totaled over $12,000. We had 25 applications that were submitted, and the foundation was able to fund, a number of those. Some of the ones one was from Woodland Spring Middle School, Cooper Allison, which is going to provide some broadcasting equipment for her student broadcasting club. We also had from Spring Hill High School, Jamie O'Shell, and Wolf Creek Elementary School, Kelly Women, who kind of went together, and there's grant is targeted around cardio drumming, as well as some spike ball PE equipment. And whenever they described to their students that were present what the grant was going to entail, the students were really excited because they knew they were going to be able to benefit from that once that equipment, is ordered and then it arrives. We also had at Spring Hill Middle School, Jeff Preston, who is putting some time and effort into designing and installing an actual disc golf course with his students. It's going to be quite a lengthy project though. But again, when he was describing that and telling the 7th grade students in the classroom at the time, they were very excited about that. We also had another one at Spring Hill Middle School, Taylor Woodward, who heard the name of her grant, and that was targeted for flip top, not flip flops, flip top whiteboard tables that makes math more engaging. The students can write on the white tops and everything, flip them up, move them around, share them with other kids, get very excited with engaging. And then at Timber Sage Elementary School, Jamie Weiss had a grant for targeting math manipulatives for students that she's going to use throughout the year, but she's also going to utilize these new resources and have an actual math engagement night for families, throughout the school year to see how those go. So again, congratulations to each of those teachers for dedicating themselves and putting in the time to write for that grant. And we appreciate this Spring Hill Education Foundation for funding and working towards having funds so those types of things can be funded, which again, in turn benefit, our students in the classroom. So, and then we have the short video this month. Like I said, it's pretty much focused on Spring Hill, what's been going on there since the first of the year at Spring Hill High School.
Right now, I would tell you, everything's going pretty well at the high school. One of the things that we're really enjoying is the e-hall pass. Our students are able to track kind of how long they're gone for a certain period of time, and it allows us as admin also to be around and be able to check out any students that we might have lost along the way that we can help get back to their learning environments.
So students in my class are currently learning how to separate mixtures, and they're doing that by, using those different separation methods like filtration and separation by density and stuff like that. This year, students have done a really good job of integrating math techniques into their class and been very interested in what they're working on.
So what's going well with the volunteer class is this year there are less restrictions with the pandemic. And so we are able to go to all of our facilities that we want to. And we have adopted grandparents in the community that we send our students to every Thursday. And they are loving it so far.
Right now, the high school band's preparing for the first football game and all of our competitions. And the jazz band is preparing for fall festival performance and other things that are going on in our community. We're looking real forward to performing all of our hard work and the upcoming events.
Last week in astronomy, we completed our rover lander activity, which is something that I did at Space Camp and then replicated in my classrooms. And so that was really exciting because I don't really know how this is going to go. But we tried it. The kids did a great job. I think they had a lot of fun with it.
We have a lot of stuff going well here at Spring Hill High School. Kids are really getting after it. They're finding their routines, finding some success, heading into week 2 of football season. So that's always exciting, but you're, always trying to compete at a high level. Right now we're 3-0.
Go Broncos.
That's our good news. Recognitions and announcements. Like I said, as we continue to go with this format, we'll probably, tweak a little bit. But again, hopefully, like I said, we going to try every month to bring you a mix of the digital with just some of the written, because there's always plenty of things that need to be recognized so that people know the great things that are happening each and every day at USD230.
Very good. Thank you, Dr. Luttrell. Great video. Congratulations.
Again,
on,
thank
well
you
done.
to Dr. Villarreal and his department and the staff for helping put that together.
Yeah, it's great to see. So moving on to action items. First action item 9.01 is the revenue neutral rate resolution. Dr. Luttrell.
Yes, you've been given the information there with the earlier, as well as, from the budget workshop we did the last meeting. And this time, like I said, we simply, as Director Schwinn mentioned, it's as much as, again, as we would really like to be able to, it would not be financially prudent to adopt the true neutral rate resolution. And so going with that recommendation, I want to definitely feel that we need to, as you said, approve the resolution there that says that we are not going to do the revenue neutral. Mr. Schwinn, is that the correct wording?
It just points out that we will be exceeding the revenue neutral rate. And it doesn't matter it doesn't matter whether you exceed it by 0.1 mil or 10 mils, we're exceeding it.
So the recommendation seems to be simply be the motion to exceed the revenue neutral resolution. And then then we'll go in and do a separate one for the approval of the fiscal year 23 budget.
Just out of curiosity, there's 286 school districts in the state of Kansas. I think, are you aware of any districts that are able to meet this revenue neutral rate?
I'm pretty sure last year, I don't think anybody did. If there was a district, I'm guessing it would be less than 5. There's probably going to be a couple this year, but again, it's going to be a district that's declining.
Yeah. or
But
shrinking, right.
they get to enjoy being funded based on last year's population, which is higher. And so, if they have a tough, some staff that are retiring or resigning for whatever reason, they just don't fill those positions, and they can live off the same money they got a year ago and still give people raises, still have money for inflation, still have money for whatever. But because they're still getting funding based on last year's student population, they might be able to meet revenue neutral. But I would venture to say it's less than 10% overall. And this applies to municipalities too. They fall under this rule. I haven't heard of anybody around us that have adopted it, but I can't speak 100% on that.
Okay, well, just based on your knowledge.
I think Miami County did. It was in the paper, and there was some people.
The county did, or the city?
One of the two. I don't remember which. I remember reading.
County went revenue neutral.
Okay. Because there was quite a bit of discussion about it.
And if we were set, well, because we're growing, I still don't see, just based on growth, it's impossible to do. But if you're holding steady and getting the same amount of money as last year, and if assessed valuation is popping on you, there's a chance you could remain revenue neutral and be all right. But for a rapidly growing district, it's just not financially responsible to do that.
I do think too, in regards to Miami County, we're really the only community that's growing in Miami County. Paola and Lewisburg may be a little bit, but Osawatomie is decreasing in population. So I don't know what the county's population is looking like overall. But I would be ready to make a motion if there's no further questions. Ready?
Please do.
Okay. Mr. President, I move the board adopt resolution number 23-07 revenue neutral tax rate. Resolution expressing the property taxation policy of USD 230 Spring Hill, Kansas with respect to exceeding the revenue neutral tax rate for financing the annual budget for 2022-2023. Whereas 2021 SB 13 and Senate sub for HB 2104 provides that a levy of property taxes to finance the 2022-2023 budget of the USD 230 exceeds the revenue neutral tax rate. To finance the 2022-2023 budget of USD 230 be authorized by resolution. Now therefore be it resolved by USD 230 that the 2022-2023 budget with a levy of property taxes exceeding the revenue neutral tax rates calculated for 2022-2023 as adjusted pursuant to 2021 SB 13 and Senate sub for HB 2104 is hereby adopted for the following funds: general, supplemental general, capital outlay, bond and interest, special assessment, special liability, and extraordinary growth facility. Adopted this 12th day of September 2022 by USD 230 Spring Hill, Kansas, Johnson, Miami County, Kansas.
Second.
It's moved and seconded to adopt resolution number 23-7 as noted and as read. Any final discussion or comment? Candy, please collect the vote.
We're going to start the vote with Mr. Hoffman,
Yes.
Mr. Updike,
Yes.
Mrs. Mitchell,
Yes.
Mr. Anderson,
Yes.
Mrs. Milius,
Yes.
Mrs. Sealing.
I'm sorry, I was on mute. Abstain.
I'm sorry? You said
Abstain.
abstain? Thank you. The total of the vote then is 5-1 approved.
Thank you. Moving on to our next agenda item of 9.02 is approval of the budget. Dr. Luttrell?
Yes, as again, as Director Swin commented, there has been a considerable amount of time spent putting together the fiscal year 23 budget. As he pointed out, the main expenditure, close to between 74 and 8% of any budget is your human capital. That does incorporate the salary enhancement that was negotiated a little over a year ago because it was a 2-year agreement. fund that, as well as, of course, we also know that health insurance costs also continue to increase. And so, you know, as we continue to offer the base plan, which allows our certificated staff to have that 100% paid option for their health insurance, which is a great benefit, but it does, you know, it also is a costly benefit. So, and then of course, one thing that we also factor for, which really you'll notice it probably more on revenue. We do not, the last 2 years have been very, very, I don't want to use the word luxury, but it's been the past 2 years with the federal government's decision, which was, I think, a good decision to allow all students to be have a free breakfast and a free lunch if they so desired. The past 2 years for the pandemic, they were able to do so, and the federal government reimbursed the districts for that student participation at the regular rate. Undoubtedly, every school district that, you know, saw an increase, which, you know, and rightly so, that was good. We wanted kids to be fed. We want them to have nutritious meals. We want them to, you know, that's going to make them better learners in the classroom. However, for this fiscal year, this school year that we're in now, 22-23, the federal government has done away with that waiver, and everything has returned now to as it was pre-pandemic. You know, we have the free reduced lunch students, and then after that, we have to, you know, lunches are paid if you're going to eat or you bring your lunch. We do expect to see a decrease because, again, we had a high participation, which is good. But and later on, when we get to the superintendent's report, I'll give you some little bit of data as to what we're seeing right now with some of our participation numbers. But that will be, you know, that amount of revenue that we take in there from prior to the last 2 years, especially, will definitely, you know, be reduced simply because of the fact it's going to be less numbers. Hopefully not, but that's pretty much me. But I would again ask again that we for a recommendation to approve the fiscal year 23 budget as presented.
I do just have a quick question for Doug. Could you, and if you can't answer this, that's fine, but that 100 students that our projection may be off, what would be the percentage of our entire budget that would affect roughly?
Yeah. Yeah, it's important to note that this year's budget, and I apologize if I've been confusing. This year's budget is based on the kids we got last September. That's a finite number. We know, and that.
So this projection doesn't come into play really on this budget.
Yeah, the impact of kids that's coming up on September 20 doesn't impact this year's budget. No impact whatsoever. It does require us to pause and think, what are we going to do next year? Because if we cut it too short this year, it could impact us next year. Because keep in mind, we've hired staff for this year, and if we hired staff to support 200 kids and we didn't get 200 kids, then we're going to be a little short next year because those kids aren't going to be counted in next year's budget. So a lot of moving variables, but the impact of the enrollment projections for this coming count date do not impact this budget. We know how many kids the weightings do. The current year weightings are part of this budget, and we did estimate a little high on transportation and a little bit high in at risk in a couple of other areas because the weightings are current year. But for the bulk of the budget, it is based on the number of kids we had last count date. So if we're 100 kids short this year, we're going to deal with that problem a year from now or 6 months from now.
Okay, thank you.
Any other questions?
I just had a couple comments that didn't make earlier. Going back to the assessed valuation of the district. I know you guys are right. We've had double-digit increases, 3 out of 4 years, I think, in Spring Hill. And we got some documentation last meeting that says the average house in Spring Hill, we are number 3 in Johnson County, behind Blue Valley and DeSoto.
No, we're 3 in the state.
Oh, 3 in the state.
Yes, all 286 districts, we're number 3.
Okay.
The average priced home is now 341,000
Yes.
in the Spring Hill School District, which does encompass part of Olathe, part of Bucyrus. You know, it's bigger than just the city boundaries, but yes.
Well, I thought the county. So, okay. But anyway, what I'm getting at is apparently the county thinks we're the greatest place in the world. Where was I going with that? I think I would invite anyone to come into our schools and look and see how we spend the tax dollars. I think we do a good job and are actually pretty frugal. A lot of all the elementaries we've built are the exact same plan. They're a shingle roof. They're not tile. We don't have marble floors. We didn't do like Olathe and import dirt for our football field from Arizona. I remember that was a long time ago. But I think we do a good job of how we spend our money. And because I'm probably one of the worst guys about that. I'm a big tightwad. So anyway, I think at the end of the day, I think it was in some communications we had this week. The job of the board is to not run the district, but to make sure it's run well. And I think hopefully we have our feet on the ground, and what the information we get and what we look for is what we need to keep us on the track we're on. So anyway, that was my 2 bits.
Yeah. I agree.
And I truly hope a year from now, our cash balances have improved. I can come back and say, hey, I've got some good news. We've got some healthier cash balances. I think it's fair that we go ahead and give voters a mill or maybe 2 mil decrease because of that. Can't make any promises. I won't today because there's a lot of variables that'll happen between now and then, but we take all of that into consideration when we're forming the budget.
I think too, like maybe people moving in here don't really see the growth, but we've lived here for 26 years. And when we moved here, the high school was where the middle school is. And we had 1 elementary school and 1 small rural elementary school. So 1 large one, 1 small one. And now we have 5 elementary schools almost next year. We'll have 3 middle schools and there's students in those schools. So you don't walk in and they're empty. There are students in those schools. So I think just moving here or being a new resident, you might not see that, but I've totally seen it. And I think a lot of us sitting up here have actually seen the growth happen. And I think we've been very fortunate to have boards that have been willing to plan for the future. And we haven't gotten stuck with nowhere to build or nowhere to put students. And so that all comes into play in our fiscal management. And Doug, I'm glad that we have you, and I really trust your judgment on lots of things, not just the finances, but I think you're a very sound person, and I'm glad that you're at the helm of all of this.
Thank you.
Can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay, so I agree with much of what Sharon and Brent said, and I think we do a great job. Doug, I think you do a fantastic job of helping with the budget. The only thing that I'll add to one of the things Brent said was the job of the board is to represent our community. And what I'm hearing loudly is a lot of people are hurting, and they're very concerned. They're worried about inflation. They know that their property values are going up 18%. We've already talked through that and how we can't have any control over property value, but we can over the mill levy. And if I'm looking at numbers, and if we are 125 kids over what we thought, realizing that's a 2-year delay, I understand. But that's 1.7 million and so with that, I'm really struggling with this. And I believe in your slides from the last meeting, we are the 2nd highest mill levy in Johnson County, right below Blue Valley, on track to be the 1st highest mill levy. And again, if anyone's listening, I think we need to talk with our legislators about the formula. But because of this, and because I feel like I need to represent who we represent, I'm going to have to vote no on this.
Okay, thank you. Any other comments or questions?
Sure. I would like to say, sorry. Thank you, Doug. I'd like to say that having kids actually in the buildings, I think that I'm able to see, I wasn't here for much of the growth. I've only lived in town for maybe 15 years. But I do have kids in the buildings, and I don't know that. I love that we have teachers. I want teachers that are engaged, and I want teachers that want to be here. And I think we spend our money really, really well on our staff and our technology and courses and things like that. Yes, we have great buildings, but that's because we needed them as we grew. And I think that we're still able to manage all of that growth. I will also say that as someone who sits and does many budgets every year and lots of experience budgeting, this is put together really well. And I would be the one that would want to go line by line, but I've looked at it and I do think it's very thorough. I don't know what value we would get out of nickel and diming a miscellaneous bucket. And I don't know that it's worth it. We spend our money, the money that we do get, very well, and we're able to educate our kids in a wonderful manner. I think that this is great. Thank you for all the hard work on it, Doug. I know it's not easy.
Any other comments or questions?
Mr. President, I move that we approve the 2022-2023 budget as presented.
Second the motion.
It's moved and seconded to approve the 2022-2023 budget as presented. Any final comment or questions? Candy, please collect the vote.
We'll begin the vote with Mr. Updike.
Yes.
Mrs. Mitchell,
Yes.
Mr. Anderson,
Yes.
Mrs. Milius,
Yes.
Mrs. Sealing,
No.
Mr. Hoffman.
Yes.
Motion is approved 5-1.
Very good. Thank you. Moving on to discussion items. First discussion item is the superintendent evaluation. Dr. Luttrell.
Yeah, brought to you a couple meetings, 2 or 3 meetings ago, the kind of an instrument to give you some time to review, to see what factors you felt you would like to see as the new superintendent when it comes time in a few months, or really, after the first couple months, of whether the expectations you have for me or any superintendent that might be in this position are being met. It does address, about 33 separate criteria and everything from board relations, staff relations, community relations, patron relations, talks about academic excellence, management of growth. So, which I think are all of the essential skill sets necessary that any successful superintendent should possess in order to lead effectively a school district, most definitely a board of education. So again, if you have any other thoughts on tweaking, feel free to share those. And if not, or, we would like to bring it back for formal approval at our September 26th meeting, so that again, we can lock some expectations in place, because there will come a time soon where you're definitely going to want to measure overall performance.
And I haven't taken this like side by side with the tool that we used before or anything, but one of the things that I did see that was, we all felt as a board, and if I'm speaking for everybody and you disagree, please let me know, but was the government relations that really isn't on here. Maybe that could go under community relations, but especially with kind of our diverse location and where we have to work with 2 counties, but more importantly with this funding formula and things, the legislative advocacy kind of side of that. I felt that was something that former superintendents have been pretty strong in. And for the most part, people at the state have liked us and have even with Doug Schwinn and Dale Dennis at the State Board of Ed have kind of helped us in some tight times because of those relationships that were established. So I would like to add that in there somewhere. And I think you'll do great too.
What?
I think you'll do great with that area as well, but.
That can definitely be an easy addition. I mean,
I was kind of hoping, or we've been looking at alternative formats that gave a little more substance to the 1 through 5 rating. And that's where I was hoping we were maybe gonna, with a new superintendent, that we could look at some kind of more of a rubric type than the subjective 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. That's just me. It's obviously a board needs to decide on that, but it's very difficult to differentiate those in my mind. We tend to look at 3 to 5 only, and I've never seen a 2 given, I don't think, on anything. So.
I would agree, Nels. I think we have to be crystal clear. I think there are the performance scale, as you've identified it here, the difference between a 1 and a 2 needs to be clear. Between a 2 and a 3, 3 and a 4, 4 and a 5. And I don't think we've had that in the past, but it is something, and I was thinking exactly along the same lines, Nels, that to have that, the detail and the clarity within the rubric, I think is really important. I also think at least this is for the first 6 months, correct? This evaluation that you're proposing is for the first.
this would
6
be
months, or-
essentially be for as long as you want it.
Yeah.
It could be a
So,
week, 6 months, a year.
I think having a new superintendent, I think we do need some flexibility around that, but I think it would charge the board to create the detail and the level of clarity within that tool that we use. So I think it's something to do, but I would propose that this would be for the first 6-month evaluation. Because I think we have to have some flexibility around things. You're on an extremely steep learning curve right now. You're almost vertical on that learning curve. And I think we've got to infuse that flexibility within that. So I think I think the board needs to own that and provide that to you. In discussion with you, we're not gonna saddle you with something that's completely unpalatable to you. So.
And I'm more, like I said, and I'm more than willing also to, like I said, it's again, it's kind of, I mean, I'm here to serve you all and you all just tell me, but I'd really, it's odd doing my own evaluation. So I mean, if you want to task me though with taking this between now and the next 7 or 8 months and
I think the board owns
get it to a direction with, because I agree with Director Anderson, the more clear you can be with descriptors, and it just creates the less uncomfortable situations down the road potentially. And I'm more than happy to try to pull some of that together. I think there's been some work done at previous that maybe could be something.
I think the board owns it, Dr. Luttrell. I think it's our responsibility. It's one of our obligations, and we owe it to you to create that. What I would say, as far as the process goes, is that we would create something. We would certainly collaborate with you to prior to finalization. But I think the board owns that task. But we would collaborate with you on that development.
I'm all for it.
Okay,
you bet.
The only comments I had, I thought it was well put together. I think you have a lot of different topics in here. There was just one comment that I had about how do we show integration of the evaluation with our strategic plan. So our strategic plan has 2 different components. There's an academic excellence and a personal development. And so I would just, and if it's in here and I missed it, certainly bring it up, and let me know. So I guess I had 2 comments. It was about that integration of strategic plan language into the evaluation. The second question I had is more of a question is, I was looking at the 4 goals that you had at like page 7 and 8.
The very, about, yes.
Yeah, and so, or I guess it's page 7 only. And how, my clarifying question is, how are we integrating or aligning these 4 goals with the previous 4 or 5 pages?
It's a great question. The way, again, the way that I would interpret that, or the way I envision that, is that when you have an evaluation tool that has close to which 33 separate criterion that you're, as I said, all of those are crucial to success. However, I think that while you have to do all of those things, some years are going to dictate more of a emphasis on some maybe than others. Being new, and as you know, well, I definitely knew what I signed up for, and I have not regretted. I love everything about USD230, but I tried to pull out, for just basically 4 areas of those 33 criterion that I felt were most crucial, that you really needed that you should focus hard in on to know if I'm the one moving forward. And so that's why I chose, having a consistent, good, thorough communication with the board. We talked about that kind of with our KSBA meeting back in July. Another one I had was, I think it's very important, which is a key component of my Listen and Learn tour, is establish that consistent communication with other groups outside the board, meaning the parents, the students, the staff, the community leaders, the legislators, the municipal governments, so that I can build, trust with those stakeholders. And then I also had one, and again, as we go through, development, which I think is our next agenda item, but we talk about, trying to make sure that we have a collaborative agenda that we're focusing upon the business that everyone feels, needs to be, covered, and that everyone understands that process and protocol for how, those items are developed and gone from thought to getting placed on the agenda. And then also, as we have discussed here tonight as part of our revenue hearing, as well as our budget, it's also, as I think this first year, I have got to make sure that I can prove to you all that I'm aware and cognizant of our enrollment numbers, how fluid those are, how those fluid numbers impact our staffing, how that impacts our budget, how that impacts, looking forward to potential if our growth continues at levels that it's targeted for, even if it's for a year or 2 off, we're going to have to still have other facilities and other programs that we're going to have to look at doing. And I think that this first year, I need to make sure and prove to you all that I have taken a fine look at making sure that I learn all aspects of the different factors that impact our district, more as whole director of the budget and everything, the staffing numbers, the numbers that we have that go into participation numbers, like for food service. There's just so many things that go into this, making sure you manage a successful district. But when it's a growing district, on top of that, you've got the factors in with your trying to pay for buildings, increases in staff, dealing with inflation. It's so many moving parts, and I have to have a close relationship with, not only Director Schwinn, but with all of you. And then also when we find areas that we feel could be looked at, that we need some help on, like getting paid, a small thing, getting paid on current year, but allowing us to estimate our enrollment so that we get paid for the students we're educating, are all things that I think going that forward. So basically it's just, I chose 4, and those 4 could change next year. What I would envision with the new tool is when you have those, maybe as a group, as a board, we define those groups. We'd like this year to see maybe this, and this.
I have a quick question because we had two documents on the board docs. So one was kind of prettier, I guess, that maybe looked like maybe had been Christopherized. And the other one was
Correct.
kind of
And
plain.
there-
So,
it should still-
but one on these goals, one has 4 and one has 3.
The
Is that-
fourth one, it should be the one that has 4 is the one that's current.
Okay,
Yes, because I added that one.
okay. And it looks like actually like maybe number 3 was the one that was
Yes.
added. Yeah, okay.
Any other comments on superintendent evaluation?
I have one. First of all, thank you for putting this together. I feel like it's very hard to come into a new position and not know how you're going to be critiqued. So thank you for putting it together. I will also say, I'm not sure, Doug, you and I had attended during the conference earlier this year. You and I had attended a breakout session, collaborative superintendent evaluation process. And we talked about reviewing that and utilizing some of those strategies in ours. I think you might have even sent it to all of us, possibly the one, it was from Kansas City, Missouri, Public Schools. But I wondered if that might be a topic for one of our workshops to help build it out. And maybe we utilize the one that Dr. Luttrell provided until we get a more clear one put in place. Because some of the main things that I noted was like it eliminated subjectivity and it had measurables in it, which I feel like kind of goes along with what you said, Doug. There's not really a rubric that goes with this to really say, this is how you get a 2 rating or a 3 rating or a 4 rating. So do you think that could be something that we can just plan now to have a workshop for?
When is our next 5th Monday? Do you? I don't. Yes, we're not gonna.
There's
do
one
that
in
on-
the next one. The next 5th one is on October, which we didn't do because that was on Halloween. Then I think after that, the next one is, I want to say it's January, which I already had planned some things, but that topic for that is wide open.
Or we could do a special meeting
You
on a
could.
Sunday. Or a Saturday.
Did you say Sunday?
I did. I don't know why. It was a bad thing to say. On a Saturday morning, spend a couple hours. I think it's a good idea. I think it's a good idea that we put that time and energy into it because it is so critical. I mean, there's a lot of research that says the board relationship with the superintendent impacts student education, and
It's an important decision.
and we need to ensure that we're all in alignment, number one, and we're all in agreement on how we're going to move forward. If the board's idea of goals for the superintendent are different than what the superintendent is thinking, you create a difficult situation. So I would propose that we do a Saturday morning, spend 3 or 4 hours to a special meeting. What day? Let's, Candy, could you send out a date request to the board and say,
Can you give me a month? Where are you looking?
October, November timeframe? We could look at the Saturday after Halloween. Right? Since that'd just be a week later than our regular scheduled workshop. So have that as number 1, would be the first Saturday in November. And then just do the first, second, and third Saturdays in November.
The second Saturday is the state school board meeting.
Oh, KSB?
Yeah.
Okay,
So that's probably not gonna work.
that would be not work. So the 1st and 3rd, right?
Mhm.
So 1st and 3rd Saturdays of November. And see what the response is.
Okay.
Thank you. And the topic would be refinement of the superintendent evaluation tool.
And honestly, this is something we've struggled with ever since I've been on the board, I think.
Yep.
So
It's
if we
different.
could get it
Yeah.
right, that would be a big win.
Well, we can certainly always be on that continuous improvement pathway, getting it right, I think so what we always strive for, but we have to make it better. And it benefits everyone. I mean, it benefits the superintendent because we provide clarity. It establishes expectations between board members. So. Any other, Nicole, did you have another comment about? Okay.
Nope, that was
So-
it.
Okay, thank you. What I made note of is adding something about the legislated relationship development. And then the second piece was adding strategic plan type language. I think a lot of the components are within here. But when I looked at the kind of the 7 established standards for superintendent evaluation, that clarity on alignment of strategic plan, I didn't see it. It may be there and I'm missing it. So. Good. Any other comments?
One thing that to me kind of good, and it probably just fits in with community relations and maybe already fits with the ones that are there, but just keeping in mind our successful history of engaging the public for large problems or major decisions. I know it kind of somewhat fits in there, but that's just something I wanted to make sure we kind of kept in the forefront.
Yeah.
I'm talking like, for bond issue decisions, and once in a while we've got major other decisions. We've done the similar items, goal setting and.
Yeah, it's more, I think if you look at a lot of the pieces on communication, I think it drives to that, but I think having that clarity around engagement and collaboration of the community on large decisions, and then most notably would be bond issues. Yeah, certainly. Any other final questions? Comments? Do you have any other questions, Dr.?
No, I'm good.
Okay.
I will make those adjustments and make that back available to each of you, and with the intent to still bring it, hopefully have it in good enough shape to have as an action item.
Okay.
At our next session.
We've been at this for a little over 2 hours. I would state that we're at recess for 10 minutes. Some return at 8:28. Thank you. It's 8:28. We're back in session. Moving on to our next discussion item, which is agenda setting. And part of this is really just walking through the current process and then asking for comments and improvements to that overall process. So at this time, as far as agenda development goes, and I gotta find my notes. Give me 1 minute here. As far as the agenda development process is that the superintendent works with the board president to develop an agenda before each meeting. That draft skeleton agenda is typically primarily developed by the superintendent in alignment with our board work calendar. That draft skeleton agenda goes out early the week before a board meeting. The second step to that is the superintendent, board president, vice president meet in a meeting to review. It's usually the Thursday or Friday before the board meeting. We have a meeting to review the final agenda. And then that completed agenda is posted in board docs and sent to board members. That's the development of the agenda. The next step is that during the meeting, one of the first things we do is to approve the agenda. And during that, or prior to that approval, board members are provided the opportunity to modify the agenda or make edits or changes to it at that point in time. And then the agenda is approved during the meeting. The actual agenda is approved. It's one of the first items on the agenda. So that's the overall process and how it gets developed. What comments or feedback do you have for improving that process or streamlining the process? Are there any recommendations or comments or input, feedback?
I don't have anything because I've never actually been involved, so.
Yeah.
I don't think it necessarily be a bad idea if people want to come see what it's like or whatever that, because this is the first time I've been involved in it. And, you know, I think that the thing that maybe we have to just be aware of is that we don't, in that meeting, kind of maybe make assumptions or something about the agenda that then other people feel like they kind of miss that link from one step to the next, because, you know, you get trying to move things forward and sometimes you could be like, well, okay, let's just do it this way. And then maybe how did it go from here to here? And I missed this, you know, that's kind of maybe how I had times feeling. So I don't know whether, I don't know what the answer to that is, but if I think people wanted to sit in on it individually without more than, you know, having 3 people there, it's not gonna be detrimental to anything or.
No, I don't. We do usually meet early in the morning on a Thursday or a Friday.
And that's probably the most challenging part of the whole thing is finding a time when people can be there because of schedules. And then you add one more person in the mix and, you know.
And the other important item that I point out there is that we have to make sure that you do not reach a quorum. So with the vice president, vice president, that's tuned into one more. And but if you would, what we could do, and I uploaded as an attachment there, you know, I did an attach there, put like the next 6 or 7 meetings. And if anyone, a third person wanted to sign up for any one of those, just to, you know, you're more than welcome to do so. And like I said, we typically do is try to meet on that Wednesday, Thursday, try to find a time on that Wednesday, Thursday, Friday window before the meeting. Usually it is in the morning, the best, but not to say that it couldn't be later, but it's the best as usual, because then there's activities in the afternoons but again, so far, I mean, I'll say that the process does work pretty well. It's not a glamorous process. I do think a lot of the business, not all, but a big portion of the agenda is shaped. It's just carryover from the prior year. I mean, there's so many things that you have to do routinely, the budget hearing, the revenue neutral hearing, all those actions we do that first meeting in July of who's going to have which responsibility. There's certain times a year that we start looking at fees for the next year, and we review our strategic plan updates. And so, I mean, it's something that, again, something that if you, someone would like to learn, especially as a newer board member, we can try, like I said, definitely try to work you in and give you that point of view.
I was trying to think of when we discussed this, who were the people that had questions about it. I think you did, Nicole.
Yeah.
And then I think maybe Allie did. Is she still on? Allie, are you still on? Okay.
I think that opening it up, like I said, I kind of had heard from a couple different districts how they do it. And I feel like it opens it, like, one, you get a different perspective. So sometimes as you're asking for data and information that come along with some of these topics, we all have kind of different areas that we really focus on. And I feel like with just having two, then maybe we're not getting everyone else's like, hey, could you bring this also, and have it kind of ready and prepared. Along with, it gives us a chance to do some sort of mentoring to the new board members like myself, as we kind of pass the torch year after year. It's not so overwhelming or intimidating to maybe sit in one of your spots. Not that we want to dethrone you or anything, but at some point, I'm sure everyone will will move on, and we'll all get to rotate. So, but I think that's, we get a little experience without having it all lay on our shoulders. So.
Sure.
I personally am happy how it works right now, and like not having to think about it. And if I have an agenda item that I want to bring up, we've got an opportunity for me to do that. So. And if I see the board skeleton, the agenda skeleton come out early in the week, I can ask for additional information. And so I like how it works right now. I've obviously been in leadership before, so know how it works. So, but I can definitely see for new folks, it'd be interesting to sit in on a couple of them.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, other folks, up to 3 of us. So we don't want to stub our toe on something.
I can definitely, in my next communication to you all, include just a little, like that very document there. And if anyone does, in fact, I'll get with Dr. Villarreal. We'll make sure that it's a Google Doc that you can go in, that way we can see. You won't, as long as you just put your name and what, if you want to come into one of the meetings, that agenda setting meetings, we know we go look every time and see who's there. You don't have to worry about sending anything back.
All right. Any final comments?
I think that's good.
Good. I think you send that out.
Sure will.
Dr. Luttrell. Very good. Moving on to our next agenda discussion item, which is Insight School of Kansas contract, Dr. Luttrell.
And this is really not anything new. We actually did there's 2 arms of the virtual school. One is the secondary, one is the elementary side. Whenever we did the one back in the early summer, it was the complete thing. But then afterwards, we got word back from the Insight from the virtual school itself, leadership, as well as Greg saying that they said in the past, they'd always approved the contract. They kept the elementary arm and the secondary arm as 2 separate documents. And so we told them to go ahead and split it back out. So the Insight one was the one. And so we did have Mr. Goheen looked that over. And but like I said, there's no changes really at all from what the one that we approved earlier for the secondary version, secondary arm of it. So, but I just want to say, you all know that then what will be brought back again as an action item or the consent agenda probably at our next meeting. But there's really no changes at all from the version that we approved for the other arm back in July. Dr. Robinson, you were more involved in that initially with the bag that kind of got all of a sudden popped up out of nowhere.
Yeah, I think the only changes are really in name. And Greg looked at it. We talked with him about the changes and said it's fine for the board to consider it. So.
But they do, and Greg did feel, he said, yeah, it probably is good to keep them separate.
Okay. Well, I'd say we could go ahead now.
I've got a question. Do we know? I don't know how many more years we've got left at Hilltop, but do we know?
For the lease, I've heard, I think that it's not.
Oh, they're not.
It was originally, it was.
Oh, they are in the board. Okay.
He knows. No. I would have to.
At the Insight's at the old board office. They're not at Hilltop anymore. So that doesn't have anything to do with.
Okay.
Is that what you were gonna say, Phil?
Yeah. My mistake. Thank you.
Any other, I'd say, bring it back on the consent agenda. And if there's any questions at that time, we can pull it out. Okay. And go from there. Very good. Thank you. Moving on to discussion item 10.04, the Forest Hill Middle School Cisco network and phone equipment.
Another part of the fiscal year budget is, we said we're a growing district. We're planning for growth facilities. We have a new middle school that was part of a bond issue that was approved several years ago. Would shudder to think if we were going to bid that school out now, how much more additional cost it would be from 4 years ago because of all the inflationary costs. But we have some technology, we're going to be continuing to furnish that now because it's well on its way to being completed. But we get into the technology infrastructure, and there's some items involving the phones and this, as well as the servers and that Director Elliott has gone through and put out for bid, and he sold through the documents. There were some vendors that responded, and if you have any questions, he's here to answer, and then we'll bring it back as a action item or through the consent agenda at the next meeting. But Phil, you have anything in particular you want to point out? Like I said,
I'll just stand, this is same stuff we've done at the last several schools, not really any different. This is basically the same template as Woodland Spring. The difference would be there's some modern and some changes in licensing. Cisco's changed a few things, so this is going to be a little bit different, but we will more than likely be bringing back our full infrastructure replacement through E-rate later this year, and it'll be in all the same part numbers and line items and so forth. So it's just the next step. Be happy to answer any questions.
Any questions for Mr. Elliott?
This doesn't fall under E-rate though, does it?
No, this will come out of the building FF&E budget.
Yeah, we got you. Right.
All right, thank you.
Thank you.
thank you, Mr. Elliott.
Moving on to agenda discussion item 10.05 is the district safety plans. Dr. Luttrell.
Yes, Dr. Villarreal's here every year. We, have our safety crisis plans updated that we review with staff. Last week we had a PD day, and one session many buildings have was again reviewing some of the things we do with in certain crisis. And Mr. Dr. Villarreal here is going to kind of walk you through that real quickly, although again, it's really not much. It's anything new that we haven't done in previous years, but Dr. Villarreal, if you want to briefly go over that.
Yep, I just had a couple of slides, like Dr. Luttrell said, to briefly go over with you. Reviewing this information during a board meeting is in compliance with board policy EBBF for crisis planning. So this year, Dr. Robinson and I worked together to put together the crisis management plan template. So we had a couple of things that we now have in the template that provide clarity across the district for who is responsible for what in the event of a crisis. One of those is the crisis response team. So we have all of the district contacts for the crisis response team. This is just a sample, but in the plan, you can see it's attached in board docs. And then we also have that role assigned to a position at the building. So the example here shows the incident commander at the district level. That's Dr. Luttrell. At the building level, that would be the building principal. So any of the roles on that team are assigned again to a role at the building. So then at the district level, we know, okay, the parent liaison at every building is going to be the front office secretary. So then we don't have to scramble to figure out, well, who was the parent liaison at that school? We just know it's the front office secretary. We can contact that person in that event. So that is in the template, which is posted to board docs on page 7, where you can look at all of the roles in detail. One of the other things that is sort of new this year, it's new in that we have put it on paper, is there is a publication for crisis management that's issued by the National School PR Association. And during any crisis, big or small, last year, I used that manual to respond to the crisis. And so now we have purchased licensing for all of our buildings to use that in crisis response. And so they have a very detailed selection of all sorts of different crises that provide step-by-step directions on how you would respond in those. And it also includes templates for communication. So on this slide are just the big overarching categories of what crises could occur. But again, within the actual crisis management template, there's information about all of the ones that are available. And then for our buildings, links to the detailed step-by-step information available to them, thanks to those licenses. So those are both available on the template. And then one of the things that you won't see here are the maps. So we didn't want to just push those out through board docs, but all of our buildings, we had Mindy Truelove work on updating all of the maps with Kylie and Tim. And so we have updated maps for all of our buildings. We have 3 different maps. One is a tornado, fire, and evacuation map for every building. One is a utilities map showing where all of the utility shutoffs are in every building. And the last, and this one was new for most of the buildings this year, is a map that shows where every first aid kit, fire extinguisher, and AED in the building is. So huge thank you to the facilities and construction team for getting those maps together for us. But in the buildings iterations of the crisis management plan, all of those have all of those maps included in their appendix. So they have those easily accessible to them at any time. And some of those maps are also posted in every building or in every room in every building as well. And then the last thing, we have 3 district adopted protocols that we use to respond in certain crises situations. So they are, like Dr. Luttrell said, not really anything new, but we are just formalizing it by making sure that it's included in the crisis plan. So one is standard response protocol, and that gives us shared language to use in the event of an emergency. So we have clear and consistent definitions on what a lockdown means or what an evacuation means. And so all of our buildings did training on this standard response protocol so they know and understand this different language. Then for active shooter situations, we are continuing to use Alice. An interesting thing to note is that Alice was recently purchased by, I just forgot the name of the company, Navigate 360. So a lot of their resources are no longer available for free. So one of the things that I know Dr. Robinson and Dr. Luttrell talked to our local law enforcement agencies about are alternatives to Alice for active shooter responses moving forward. But for this year, because we have training materials from years prior, we're going to continue to use Alice for this year. So that's our active shooter response. And then this was something that we started last year and will continue to work toward this year is Project Adam for Heart Safe Schools. So this is a protocol to use in the event of a cardiac emergency. So we're working with our buildings on completing this effort. And by the end of this year, all of our buildings will be designated and certified heart safe schools, meaning we have very clear processes and procedures in place for the event of a cardiac emergency. So those are the quick highlights of our crisis management plan. Like I said, the template is available for you here in board docs. And as members of the board, if you would like to see a completed version of a building handbook, we can provide that to you as well, just so you can see what it looks like when it's all filled out. But with that, I will stand for your questions.
Do we have the AEDs in all the buildings now?
We do, and they're also available in a couple of different locations in the larger buildings. I'm thinking specifically right now of the high school, like they have 2 out at the stadium.
That's what I
in
thought. I
different
saw the
parts
little
of the-
flashing light.
Yeah.
Okay, that's good.
Any other questions or comments for Dr. Villarreal?
And this does have to be approved by the board, so it will be on the consent agenda at the next meeting unless you want it listed as a separate action item.
I think consent agenda would be fine. It looks comprehensive. I like the way you're codifying things for clarity. And rather than having to identify a role rather than a person, it seems like a really good plan. So that you're not constantly changing names.
The page with the definitions of lockdown, whatever, is that something also that is communicated with the public or with parents too?
So in addition to our standard tornado drills and fire drills, when our buildings do their crisis drills, like their Alice drills, then they review that with them. We also gave posters to every teacher to hang in their classroom with that language on there. So as far as parent communication, we haven't done much with that yet, but it is being taught to our students.
I mean, I'm just thinking of in the community, oh, such and such is on lockdown or this happened. And sometimes they get the wording wrong or whatever happened wrong. And even those symbols with it could be a pretty powerful community communication tool too. So I really like that.
Any other questions or comments? Thank you. Appreciate it.
Thank you.
Well done. Moving on to possible items on the horizon that may soon be an agenda item.
I'm gonna shorten that down.
Yeah, I just wanted to bring up during this point is during our organizational meeting, we identified our KASB delegate, voting delegate. And so it was approved at that point. I just got I got a communication from Kansas Association of School Boards to submit that name to them. And so I'll take care of that, but I just wanted to let the board know that I'm the delegate. So, yeah, thank you. Dr. Luttrell.
On the, like I said, there's really not much has changed. I do know tonight, as I try to shape some of the agendas for the coming months, one thing that, as I said, I know the couple of the items that have been earlier, we do in the between now and November-ish, we plan to gather and bring you some information about what feedback we have from not just staff, but parents and students about how our PLCs are going. As we said, even though this is year 4, this is really so far, really what we're hoping is an entire normal year. We've had one early release and one late start with that this year because last week we didn't coming off of Labor Day, and we took the first full week, just the first 8, just to get everybody into the swing of things. So those will begin quite a bit more frequently. But we're hoping that by the end of the first quarter, and we will have enough of a baseline that we can start maybe trying to put some feelers out to get some feedback. I have been trying slowly to make sure that parents know and that we get our principals and them to also, every chance they get, use the pulpit to inform as many people as we can, especially the parents, that this time is very crucial to student learning. It's very important for us, if we're going to continue continuous improvement, we've got to have that time. We've got to protect that time, and we've got to let everyone know that we're doing it for the benefit of the students, because those discussions, the dialogue that occurs during that time is supposed to be focused on individual student learning, so that teachers come together and collaborate on ways to help individual students and groups of students as a whole. But there's parts in that process, especially with the early release, late start, with the why, it impacts a lot of individuals. And so we're aware of that. We hope to have a report back to y'all to give you some information and insight of where we're at with that, and what are some of the perceptions, hopefully by, sometime in November at the latest, if we stay on track for that, which again, not that we'll want to make too many decisions based on that, but I think that'll give us some good baseline data to see how this is going. Even though it's year 4, we haven't really had a full normal year yet. We already talked, we're probably going to be adding a work session, for a topic sometime in November. We'll try to get that out and get that communicated. I'd also talked about at some point, again, with which I'll talk about in the superintendent's report, there time's going to come where we're going to have to go back to the voters and ask for some resources. Now, what's that going to look like? I don't know. How long from now? I don't know, because again, even when our numbers, which I think they're going to come in, eventually going to catch up, but when those numbers do fall short, we don't like that. But if it does fall short and we don't recover, that does buy us some time to not to have to just rush in and do something. So, I mean, there's good and bad with it, but we have to be very prudent and diligent and systemic about how we approach it. But I still think maybe by January, we'll know much more for sure numbers and kind of see where we're at. We'll look at that time. At some point, I'm going to get with Director Schwinn, and I want to sit down and talk with our individual that does all of that Raymond James, the one that does that watches over all of our bonding and our debt, and helps us be creative in ways whenever we need something of how we can go about attacking it and getting it in the most economical format. So those, again, there's never going to be for a lack of items that we can talk about. And then one that I think you'll be looking forward to, that I do plan at some point, again, hoping this is sometime in October, in that November round 2. I want to have Dr. Smith and I have been talking. We're going to get Dr. Villarreal in on some of the discussion, but I do want to bring, and because I still think that you got to look at assessment data from a lot of different forms. We look at it through our formative local assessments, our summative assessments, but I also think you can also, we need, at the end of the day, need to see where do we stand with our peers when it comes to state assessment. Even if the test does change, which it does, and it has, we're still comparing everybody that, everybody was in the same boat. So, but that's not the end all in all. But at some point, hopefully over the next 2 or 3 meetings, there'll be a time where Dr. Smith and I will probably, like I said, let Christopher come as well and give you some information just on the state assessment data. Now, again, there's a lot of ways you can look at that, and but we hope we can put something together to give you a perspective from a lot of different angles on things to think about as we move forward, because that also sheds light, that's the data piece on the parts about then what do we need to do with our strategic plan as we adjust at the building level. A lot of our specific strategies and action steps that we're doing to make sure that we target student learning so that our kids achieve. So that's just some of the things coming up on the horizon that we're going to be a lot of items to be thinking about in the next 3 or 4 months. And by that time, we'll be rolling into spring and planning for the 23-24 school year. And hope we get to do that and not have to get off track with some pandemic again.
Very good. Thank you. Board work calendar?
No changes to that. Again, the big thing with the board work calendar, I do know it's in my superintendent's report too, that we do need to, we do have coming up. I don't think it's next week on the 24th is homecoming, but we actually, there will be, and if any of you are wanting to go, we can probably still get you in, but the Teacher of the Year banquet in Wichita is on the, it's the same weekend as homecoming, the same week as the, I guess, is it Fall Festival? So that's gonna probably I plan to attend that back. We have several staff that are planning to attend because, as you know, we do have a teacher that has made the finals. And, you know, I know that she's going to be a hard one to beat. And so I know we do have individuals that will be there to support that. It's in the middle of the, it's kind of like late afternoon. It starts at like 4 o'clock. It's in Wichita. Because it is.
So this isn't like the regional one that used to be in September. That's now in January. Is that right? Does anybody know? They kind of changed the cycle of it, right?
Yeah, no, this is actually the event they'll announce the winner.
The
This is
big
the
winner.
big one. It's
Gotcha.
the big,
Yeah, we remember.
it's like the Oscars.
No kidding.
So that's all I have on the work calendar. There's just a lot to do always.
Right, superintendent report.
Then the superintendent's report, couple things. My listen and learn tours continue. Great feedback. I've done 3 schools. I've done the 2 middle schools and the high school with students, staff, and parents. I've got starting this week and next week, I'm starting with the elementary. I know I have Wolf Creek, I don't know, Wolf Creek or I know Timber Sage is this Thursday. And then I've got one on tomorrow at one of the other elementary schools, but they've been great. Again, common themes. I can tell you what's refreshing is our students, our staff, and our parents, and if I've talked to the ones that they all have very, very positive things to say about the district in all areas. And when it comes to asking them the questions, could we focus on to maybe make even better or stronger? They always, again, come back with, very solid, tangible things that are definitely doable. I mean, it's just something that, again, when we get all of this done and I bring you the summer report as a board, that'll be something we'll have to collaborate on. And after taking all that information, deciding, okay, what parts of it do we think can really benefit us? We can maybe incorporate into our strategic plan moving forward that we think is going to pay off dividends for us, with student success and district success. That continues. Our food service. For now, we are at full staff at the high school. Our participation numbers there continue to increase. Now, remember, as I said earlier, we went from everybody eating free the last 2 years to now it's kind of back to the way it was. Like I said, it was late last week after Labor Day is when we returned to offering pretty much quite a few menu choices, entree items, hot items, at both breakfast and lunch. She put some data in there. Put a little chart in there that just kind of showed how many reimbursable meals that have been served each day, in addition to the amount of a la carte purchases that were made. And you can see that slowly, even though it's, they're slowly climbing. And I expect to see those numbers continue. Are we going to get back to the level? I was just telling Director Anderson at the break, I would love to see us get back to those numbers from last, but it's probably unrealistic for that to think that, because again, it's especially now with, inflation and, parents, them are, sometimes make decisions and they say, they will maybe send their lunch with their child. But as far as every cafeteria across the district, we're serving nutritious meals. They've got choices, the fruits and vegetables, the salad bars, definitely where they're getting their produce is really good because it looks delicious every day and they're eating it. Even at the elementary schools, those students dive into those vegetables. which is good to see. And then, as I said, we do have more of one of our 3 or 4 updates on the strategic plan. Will be slated also at one of our meetings in October. The current building level plans are kind of in refinement as they're been doing their Fast Bridge formative assessments. We'll be incorporating that in where they'll be able to then setting their benchmarks. But again, Dr. Virio, Dr. Smith and I will also probably around the time we're giving you that state assessment report. We'll give you some information, give you an update as to what progress we're making with our strategic plan. We completed right at around 17 days. Again, as enrollment count day is fast approaching. And I believe it's actually a week from tomorrow, Doug, the 20th, right? So we'll kind of see where we're at right now. Like I said, numbers are fluid. You can see, I know it was late last week, we're at 3775. Now that is basically our in-seat student enrollment. It does not include, of course, the virtuals. And like I said, those will remain fluid, but even still yet, the way it shakes out, the number that we have, the 3775, is still higher than what it was at count day last year. Okay. And we'll just get, it's just a slow and steady. The State of the District breakfast is coming up for the Thursday, October 13th. This year, it's going to be that morning, and it's going to actually be this year at Woodland Spring Middle School. And the reason it's being moved there this year is because of the fact that we're pretty sure that because of the multi-purpose room, that site and the fact that the multi-purpose room there has a stage, we can actually use the full floor for tables and that, and we should hopefully be able to have the opportunity for more people to be in attendance for that event as we highlight.
Is
much
that
of our
at
district.
7:30?
Dr. Viria, what's the start time for the breakfast?
Okay.
7:30. And then as we mentioned earlier, the Kansas School Board Association Annual Conference is November 11th through 13th. If you plan to attend, I think most of you have already indicated, we need to make sure that we get you registered. If you haven't already, and Candace, you might want to see Candy after the meeting about that. Okay. And then the National School Board Conference is April 1st through 3rd. That registration has not yet opened, but it's going to. And we put if you want to check out that URL there, it'll give you specifics. But I think, Candy, we said last week that it actually is going to open sometime in early, is it November or October? It's early October, wasn't it? It was when it's going to.
October 5th.
Okay, October 5th, yeah. So we really need to know it by that date if you're gonna go and how many rooms you need, because the main convention hotel will fill up fast.
It's a Saturday through a Monday. They changed it. I'm just looking at it.
Oh, it's not.
Saturday through Monday.
Friday through,
Yeah.
well, usually it goes Friday through Monday, I think, but
That's the main conference, but isn't the Friday like an early session or something?
Oh, that's what it showed.
Yeah. I'm guessing they probably still.
So again, it is in Orlando this year. So that, and then, like I said, and just a reminder, our next board meeting session is set for the 26th September. But remember, that'll be a morning session because we're back for a few months going to one of the buildings. For one of the meeting, we try to showcase at least half of the meeting on the building and then do some light business so that everyone can still get out for their day by, right at 8 o'clock. So, but those will start back up at our next meeting, which is 2 weeks from today, but it'll be in the morning. That's all I have, President Updike.
I have a question about your listen and learn tour. What's your parent participation look like?
Not been strong. I mean, we've had at The high school, like I said, the high school one was the night after they had their parent night, the night before, and plus, you know, there's just so many, at the secondary level, there's so many activities right after school. And last week, I probably had 5 or 6 parents at each. I had Woodland Spring and at Spring Hill Middle School. Now, I do think it'll be higher. I'm hoping it'll be higher for the elementary, you know, the K-5s. But I guess I'll find that out this week. But and we try to convey also that parents can attend, you know, any of the locations if they can't make a certain one. And we have tried to make the parent one be more of a drop-in kind of the student, the staff is kind of more of a come in, sit down, let's dialogue everybody together. But with different schedules everyone has at the afternoon levels, we know at the secondary and elementary parent schedules from work and that it's evolved. The ones that have come is we've made it more of a sit down, drop in, sit down where if they want to can talk, introduce themselves for 2 or 3 minutes. We give them all the survey. They can get the QR code for that. We'll get their email, then we can send them an actual survey. The 3 main questions that we asked during our discussion, which are what is USD230 done well, continues to do well? What might be some areas that could be tweaked? And then the third one being, what's some words of wisdom that they might offer me as I begin, you know, the new journey? But no, it hasn't been as high as I would like, but I don't think it's for that they just don't want to. I just think it's just a lot going on.
Parents, get to the listen and learn tours.
Any other questions? We are